The girl, who had lost hope, was doomed to wander barefoot through the empty temple, clutching her heart. She was desperate, consumed by the pain of losing her beloved. The brunette stumbled and fell, her body appearing very weakened. She was certain that someone had killed her man, which made her weep. As she gazed upon the Catholic fresco in the temple, the girl blamed someone for his death. She shed tears on the temple floor, crawling closer to the holy image and praying to God, if he truly existed, to take her life in exchange for her lover's life. The last thing the protagonist remembered was falling asleep while reading her favorite novel. When she woke up, she realized that she had become a part of the book, a character who was not mentioned in the story. She had been given the beautiful body of a dark-haired girl named Hestia, who lived completely alone and was very wealthy, albeit without a family. The protagonist was immensely happy with her new riches and her overall situation. Her first move was to buy herself the status of an aristocrat, wanting to attend a ball and have the chance to meet the main characters of her novel. After getting permission to attend the ball, the girl immediately found the novel's main characters, who, in her opinion, were perfect for each other. The lovely pink-haired and blue-eyed protagonist of the novel was Diana. The tall, masculine, and handsome brunette with golden eyes and the right to the throne was Helios. The coldest and cruelest character in the novel, the charming man and beloved character of Hestia in the book, was the blonde Caelus. The girl was incredibly happy to see these three characters in real life. Being a true fan of the book, she was enchanted by its characters. According to the book's plot, Diana was a deity-like figure, merciful, tender, and sensitive to others' troubles, which made the main protagonist, Prince Helios, and his best friend, Marquis Caelus, fall in love with her. There were also villains in the novel, such as Duke Orcus, the head of the aristocracy, and his daughter. The latter intended to marry the prince, the novel's main character, through her family's influence and soon become empress. The novel's protagonist was an obstacle to her goals, so there were many moments of disputes between them in the book, and the duke's daughter humiliated poor Diana. For the girl's safety, the prince reluctantly married the duke's daughter. However, the Marquis, being the prince's best friend, decisively killed all their enemies to save his friend and his beloved. After this, instead of a happy ending, problems began. Diana was horrified by the Marquis's actions. She drove him away, not wanting to see him again, hurting his love-stricken heart. According to the plot, the main characters soon got married. Hestia was delighted to see the novel's plot develop live, albeit from the sidelines. Watching the newlyweds' carriage ride away, she realized that the novel had come to an end. The girl was certain that she would now return to her world. She could only speculate about what happened to the Marquis in his future life. When the novel's plot was finished, the main protagonist was certain that she would soon return home to her loved ones. She was even glad about it, even though she would not be able to live as luxuriously as before. However, neither the next morning nor any other day after the story's conclusion did the girl return to her world. She continued to wake up in the book's novel for unknown reasons. Not knowing how this happened, the girl gave away all her wealth to the poor and was left with nothing. She was very frightened of being stuck in the novel forever because, unlike the novel's main characters, she had no future, family, wealth, or a beautiful story. Above all, in the year after the plot's end, Hestia was shocked by the news of attempts to take the life of her beloved character, the Marquis. He had lost his best friend and his beloved girl, and his life no longer had any meaning. Every day, Hestia prayed for her beloved Marquis's salvation. The girl wandered hopelessly through the forest, cursing the world for mocking her. Not only was she unable to return home, but she was also forced to watch the Marquis perish. Hestia fell to her knees and wept bitterly, dreaming of disappearing. At that moment, Marquis Caelus approached her. He immediately begins to walk away as soon as she notices him, but she firmly stops him. The main heroine wants to say something to him, but she doesn't get the chance. In the distance, one can hear the cries of the Marquis's servants who are searching for him in the depths of the forest. Caelus grabs the girl and holds her tightly, hiding behind a tree from the servants. She can hardly believe her luck, being in the embrace of the Marquis. The main heroine is concerned about the situation and offers her help to Caelus. They enter her small house in the forest together. The girl is beside herself with happiness that she can look at the man so closely, glad that he is in front of her. Hestia asks the man about what happened, but instead of an answer, she receives a rebuke for her words. She wanted to disappear, and he heard it. The girl comes up with a false reason for her words, and the Marquis tells her that they are alike. He tells the girl that he wanted to die in that forest, and it hurts her to hear it. She is worried about his well-being and runs to buy some food for him. She is inspired by the upcoming care for the man. However, upon returning home, Hestia finds the man lying on the floor with a stab wound. He had pierced himself with a dagger. Hestia discovers a bloodied body on the floor, causing her to drop the groceries in shock. The man had plunged a dagger into his chest. She lifts his body and looks at the face of the Marquis, unable to comprehend how he could do such a thing. Just when she had found purpose in caring for him, he took his own life. Hestia weeps. On the table lay a letter from the man, apologizing for the disorder he had caused. The news of his death made it into the newspapers the next day, but was quickly forgotten amidst the succession of other news stories, including a feud between other main characters. Hestia was in complete despair, feeling as though her life had lost all meaning, and wandered aimlessly around the temple. Accidentally bumping into other worshippers, they become angry with her but take pity on her condition. They speak of Saint Diana, who, as the wife of the prince, had withdrawn from interacting with common people. Looking at the Catholic fresco in the temple, Hestia blames the main characters of the novel for the death of the unfortunate Marquis. She prays to God to bring Caelus back to life, offering her own life in exchange. Hestia awakens in her soft abode, as if at the very beginning of her appearance in the novel. The young woman is perplexed, not understanding what has happened. She realizes, however, that she has been transported back to the end of the novel. Although she cannot fathom why she has been brought to this particular point, it is of little importance to her, for she knows that today marks the first attempt by the Marquis to end his life, and she is determined to put a stop to it. Approaching the first carriage she encounters, Hestia tosses a bag of gold into the driver's face and demands to be taken to Caelus's residence. She believes that she has all the necessary tools to rectify the situation and save her beloved from the book. She desires to prevent his meeting with the novel's protagonist, fully aware of how ardently the prince courted her, and how the Marquis gave her everything he had, without ever receiving any gratitude in return. Upon arriving at the gates of his estate, Hestia informs the guards that she has an urgent matter to discuss with the Marquis. Deceiving the guards, the heroine of the novel makes her way into the man's abode. It seems as though nothing can stop her. Just in the nick of time, she bursts into Caelus's bedroom as he lifts a dagger to his throat. Witnessing this horrifying sight, Hestia wishes that the novel's protagonist would regret treating Caelus so cruelly. Rushing towards the man, she shoves him to disarm him. Only after this does the young woman introduce herself to the Marquis. Devising a pretext for her arrival, she desires to become his spouse. Euros, the valet of Caelus, had served his family for many years, and then Caelus himself. He had warm feelings towards his master, having taken care of him for so long. The valet believed that the man would quickly recover from what had happened. However, he was wrong. He had just witnessed the Marquis attempt to take his own life, and then a strange girl had burst into the estate. In response to the girl's words, the Marquis began to laugh loudly. His next words shocked the main heroine, as he agreed to marry Hestia. It seemed as though the man didn't care, agreeing to the marriage and then leaving, giving the girl the opportunity to discuss everything with the valet. The girl claimed to be an aristocrat, the daughter of a lord, and blamed for the destruction caused in the estate. The valet accused the girl of being responsible for the damage caused to the estate, striking the Marquis, and trespassing on private property, but thanked her for saving his master's life. The valet then asked the main heroine how she knew that his master would try to end his own life. At that moment, Hestia decided that she was now the main heroine of the story, the future wife of the Marquis, and thus answered with a fabricated lie that she could see the future. She realized that this lie was unconvincing, and the man didn't believe her, so she quickly decided to do something else. She mentioned the indisputable proof of her so-called power of foresight, the pink diamond that the valet was supposed to give to Saint Diana on behalf of the Marquis. The valet expressed surprise at this information. The main heroine continued, informing him that the valet had not been able to carry out the order, so the pink diamond was in the third drawer of his master's desk. The man was skeptical about whether to believe the girl or not. Then the main heroine revealed the future that awaited the Marquis: death. She admitted that she wanted to save him through her power. However, in order to save him, she needed to be close to him, and that was why she needed to become his wife. The girl promised the valet that she would never hurt the Marquis. The valet informed her that his master would decide what to do next in the morning, and for now, she could spend the night in the estate. Hestia was determined to save the Marquis, while he, in the meantime, was unsure about what to do next. Hestia was reluctant to reveal her desire to become the Marquess's wife. She only wanted to help him and be a little closer to him as an employee, but the stressful situation forced her to speak her mind. She wakes up in the mansion after a strange dream. The butler kindly inquires about the main character's night spent in their house, and Hestia responds favorably. She asks about the Marquess's well-being, And the servant answers, but wonders how she, seeing the future, cannot know it herself. The girl clarifies her own lie, saying that she only sees bright events, not such trivialities. The butler is very skeptical about the idea of marriage, but since the main character saved the Marquess's life, he cannot object. The man spoke with his lord and spent the whole night preparing documents, which the girl must now read and discuss with Kalis all the details. The servant asks Hestia to be careful with his lord, as he is still weak after yesterday's events. The girl enters the Marquess's quarters and greets him. She is very nervous before the conversation but is determined. The main character sits across from the man and begins to read the contract, according to which she will have all the same rights as the Marquess, his status, even if she will not be free. Hestia asks to remove the part about property, as she doesn't need anything from the Marquess. She wants to discuss everything, but the man is already signing the marriage contract. The Marquess tells everyone to leave now that the marriage contract has been concluded. The main character is surprised but happily welcomes the man's decision. Hestia is going to the temple. She wants to take something that belonged to the Marquess. She plans to start with Diana. Despite her divine power, Diana was not accepted by the church. It was only after Kalis sacrificed his best lands to the chapel that she was finally accepted. Furthermore, the saint married the crown prince and lived happily. Hestia was irritated by Diana's behavior and intended to show her how much Kalis had done for her and what he had sacrificed. When the carriage arrived at the church, the main character got out and was approached by a servant who thought it was Marquis Kalis. The servant was surprised when he saw the girl instead. Hestia introduced herself as the Marquis's wife but was immediately taken for a liar because everyone knew that he was in love with Diana and could not forget his feelings for her. However, the girl did not listen to the servant's words and went straight to the priest. Unfortunately, the priest could not meet Hestia in person. Instead, she was met by another high-ranking church official who wanted to clarify her identity. Hestia expected this and handed the man a document proving her marriage to the Marquis. The man recognized the validity of the document but still handed it over to a servant for further verification. Finally, Hestia was able to state the real reason for her visit to the church. She wanted to reclaim the lands that her current husband had once given to the chapel. If Diana no longer attended the church, the lands could be taken back. The church's servants were a little scared of the main character's words, so they quickly left and asked Hestia to wait for the priest. The girl is pleased that her words have had an effect on the clergyman. Otherwise, she would have had to resort to threatening the prince and his wife. Suddenly, a priest enters the room. He differs from the other servants and is very courteous to the guest. They have already verified the documents and are now certain that Hestia is the wife of the Marquis. The priest is now ready to discuss the return of the land. He has no intention of returning it, as the territory has belonged to the church for many years. Hestia feels uncomfortable under the gaze of this man alone. She tries to remain calm and confident, as she has the status and authority to carry out her plan. The girl threatens the priest by exposing Diana's wrongdoing towards Marquis Kalis in the newspaper and mentioning the church that had helped her. The priest becomes enraged. The main character observes her interlocutor's nervousness despite his attempts to feign ignorance with a smile. She then takes a more direct approach and suggests that they frame the situation differently, making the church, rather than the prince's spouse, the primary offender since it was the chapel that claimed the Marquis's lands. Not all aristocrats recognized Diana's sanctity, and her popularity was primarily among the common people. If everyone were to learn of the churches and the saints' misdeeds, Diana's reputation would suffer even more. The priest tries to make Hestia stop threatening him, shocked that something like this is even happening. However, the main character is not of high rank, and she is indifferent to the rules of decorum. Furthermore, she will inform the emperor about the corruption in the church if the lands are not returned to her husband. Then that place will be thoroughly investigated, revealing many other financial irregularities. Hestia bluffs, claiming that she is ready to provide tangible evidence of the priest's misdeeds. Finally, the Marquis makes his proposal to the church, portraying it as an act of kindness, and the priest surrenders, although he remains angry. In the evening, Hestia returns home. The butler is pleased to see her, as he had begun to worry that there might be some problems. However, the main character shows him the documents for the lands, and he realizes that everything has gone well. Kalis observes all of this for a long time from the window before leaving, but Hestia notices him. It is time to inform him about the return of the lands, and the butler suggests that the young lady do it herself, but she does not want to bother her husband with too much attention just yet, even though she would like to see him. Eros will have to do it himself. Hestia goes to her room to relax, satisfied with her work. The young lady can finally relax on her bed. The day passed by very quickly for her, but if she continues on the same path, she will quickly finish her revenge. The next morning, she plans to visit the lands that were taken. Even though it is the Marquis' duty, he better not think of such things right now. Falling asleep, the young lady thought that she had completely forgotten about the consequences that her actions could lead to. Meanwhile, the Crown Prince has already learned about what happened and cannot believe it without seeing it for himself. When Hestia woke up, Kalis called her to him, which surprised the young lady very much, because not so long ago he did not even want to look at her, and now he invited her for a conversation. The main character is very worried that the young man can kick her out because she returned the lands. However, Kalis is interested in her origin, as he was not even sure he remembered her name correctly and is reading the newspaper that Hestia brought him. Then, suddenly, he looks straight at the main character and asks about her motives for marrying him. Hestia realizes that she cannot lie convincingly enough, and therefore decides to tell the truth. She only wants Kalis to never think about death again, and for his enemies to finally realize what they have done and pay for their actions. Kalis remembers the conversation he had with his butler, where he deemed the elderly man insane for telling him about his wife's ability to see the future. Despite the direct evidence, it was still hard to believe. The girl saved Kalis from suicide, as if she knew about his plans beforehand, and she also knows about the pink diamond. In addition, the main heroine cannot be called selfish. She gave up her rights to her husband's property when signing the marriage contract and returned the lands for Kalis' sake. It seems that she really does have feelings for the Marquis. However, something still bothers Kalis. Then the Marquis tries to understand why the girl, who had never even seen him before, suddenly proposed to him and did so much good for him. Hestia herself does not know how to answer this question, as from the outside, everything looks very strange. After their last encounter, they only met on the day when she asked Kalis to marry her. She thinks about what to say and eventually makes the only right decision in her opinion. She suggests that Kalis annul their marriage. If she remains a stranger to him, then leaving would be the best option. However, Kalis did not ask for this. He only informed Hestia about the letter he received from the Crown Prince and that he does not intend to interfere in her affairs. The Marquis just wants to observe what will happen. The main heroine is very pleased with this situation because now she has complete freedom of action. So Hestia hastens to prepare for the meeting with the Crown Prince, while the Marquis decides to answer the letter himself and otherwise relies on Hestia. At the door, the anxious butler meets the young woman, ready to console and justify his master's actions. But fortunately it is not required. The heroine asks the man to prepare a carriage, as she intends to go to the prince. The servants immediately begin to enthusiastically prepare her for this important visit. After some time, the main character looks simply stunning. She is surprised by the kindness with which everyone in the Marquis' house treats her, given that she appeared there not long ago, and unexpectedly became their mistress. All the servants hope that Hestia will be able to avenge their master, and therefore they trust her so much. In her beautiful body and finely dressed, the main character is confident that she will look worthy in front of the Crown Prince and Diana. She sets off on her journey with a victorious mindset. However, upon arriving at the palace and seeing her opponents, Hestia no longer seems as beautiful as before. She introduces herself as the Marquise. Diana realizes that she has already seen this girl somewhere before. The main character reminisces about her first encounter with Diana when she first arrived in this world. At that time, the current wife of the Crown Prince was modestly dressed but tasteful, and helped simple people with their injuries as if she really came down from heaven. Surely anyone who meets this girl will fall in love with her. Hestia suspects that it's all because Diana is the main character. As it turned out, the once modest girl now lives in luxury. With a sweet smile, Hestia denies the possibility of meeting the Crown Prince's wife earlier. In reality, she wants to laugh. Later, the main character shows Helios her marriage certificate and a letter from her husband. When the prince sees the Marquis' handwriting, he is shocked that it turned out to be true. Diana also does not believe that the Marquis could have married so easily and wants to see the papers that the girl brought. Of course, the Marquis usually does not make hasty decisions, but all the facts point to the fact that he did indeed marry Hestia. The main character may be able to read the thoughts of these two, as their faces clearly show surprise and doubt. Nevertheless, they cannot dispute the facts. However, even accepting that he is in front of the Marquis, the Crown Prince condemns Hestia for abusing her power when she took her husband's land, threatening the church. The girl did not think that the ruler knew about this, as she did not leave any evidence, but she does not show that she is flustered. She makes it clear that she has always told the truth. The way the situation with land ownership turned out was wrong. Hestia has an answer to every reproach or accusation from her enemies. Once, Hestia was in great pain and went to the temple to ask for help from the saint. However, she was thrown out of there because Diana had no time for common people. After the saint entered the ruler's family, she stopped helping people. Now Hestia uses this as evidence that the girl is not using her powers correctly. But the prince is not willing to listen to such hurtful words towards his wife. Hestia apologizes, though in reality it only makes her angry. The girl tries to understand if the prince or his wife want to return the lands to the temple, as with their return, it would be easier for the Marquis to release his feelings towards the saint. Hestia tries to be friendly in conversation, although sometimes her thoughts are completely opposite to her words. The saint tries to taunt her, but it does not bother her at all. Then the prince wants to understand why out of all the beautiful women around, the Marquis chose Hestia. The moment has come for the main heroine to confess that she, just like the prince's wife, has a special ability to see the future. Of course, no one immediately believes her, but Diana looks depressed, as she thought she was the only one of her kind. To prove that she is not lying, the girl suggests making a prediction for someone in the couple. In the evening, Hestia told her husband everything that had happened. He was happy to listen to her. In the end, they did not believe her, even when she said that in a couple of days they would catch a dangerous criminal who committed theft in the palace. But the prince was skeptical of this information. The Marquis also asks about Diana. The main heroine already speaks about this topic with caution. Based on Caelus's reaction, it becomes obvious that he still loves the saint. Nevertheless, the man thanks his wife for the lands that have returned to him, their presence calming him down. Caelus approaches the main heroine, causing her to blush deeply. Strange thoughts come to her mind, and she tries to push them away, but the Marquis notices the strange expression on her face. He simply suggests that Hestia ask him for something she needs. The girl does not want anything special. She did it not to fulfill desires, but for the man she loves, and just seeing his face is already a reward for her efforts. However, she still dares to voice one request. Hestia would like to have a tutor, but only if Madame Harmonia could be invited to the position. This does not please the Marquis, as this woman is very close to the saint. After two ladies who opposed the prince's wife were poisoned, and it was done by Caelus himself, other people in high society were afraid to speak out against the saint, but many still remained dissatisfied with this situation. Hestia wants to use this to her advantage. At first glance, her actions seem illogical, as she could find support among Diana's opponents, rather than involve her loved ones. But there is another goal. Madame Harmonia has always been a mentor to the saint, teaching her etiquette, and persuading her not to deny her feelings for the prince. Sooner or later, this woman will help Diana win the support of the aristocrats, and thus, the obstacle must be eliminated before she has a chance to do harm. Caelus thinks for a long time before giving an answer, and then decides to allow his wife to do as she wishes. He does not know what Hestia's plan is, but he is very grateful to her for her help. Throughout the evening, the protagonist cannot calm down. She is thrilled that her husband has finally warmed up to her and expressed gratitude. This helps her forget about everything that has been troubling her and gives her the motivation to try even harder for her beloved. The following morning, she rewrites a letter to Madame Harmonia through the butler. She wants to visit the woman in person instead of inviting her over. She is confident in her ability to interact with any character, having made her way up from being a commoner to a noblewoman. Additionally, at present, she simply cannot afford to make a bad impression. This thought gives her some comfort. Although she had hoped for a personal meeting with Madame Harmonia, she never expected it to happen so soon. Now, Hestia is already on the threshold of Madame Harmonia's house. She is even happy that she can solve one of her problems right now. Inside, the atmosphere is pleasant until she introduces herself to the butler as Marquise Hestia, and everyone starts to look at her with unfriendly glances. Perhaps they have learned about what happened in the church. The protagonist wants to leave this terrible place as soon as possible. Fortunately, Madame Harmonia finally comes out and takes Hestia to her office for a conversation. The woman is surprised that Hestia decided to visit in person. Invitations are usually sent instead. Hestia wants to show that she is serious and has come in person for that reason. As far as the protagonist remembers from the novel, the saint won Madame Harmonia's trust through her modesty and honesty. Hestia intends to do the same. She starts crying and asks for the woman's help, and, of course, Madame Harmonia is worried and tries to calm the Marquise down and understand what happened. However, these tears are just a lie. The main protagonist bemoans her life, but her words are largely a skillful lie. Hestia decides to win the woman over to her side with a beautiful story about a simple village girl who attained status and wealth, but remained kind and modest. However, despite this, the protagonist's problems persist. While her opponent may have a more touching backstory, someone with compassion will undoubtedly help in Hestja's difficult situation. Harmonia ponders and hesitates to answer the request, which alarms the protagonist as this behavior is out of character for her. Perhaps Hestja has missed something and now the woman does not want to help her. The girl is already considering leaving and abandoning the idea when unexpectedly, the woman asks about the reasons behind the protagonist's marriage to the Marquis. This question surprises Hestja. She never thought that the woman would be simply interested in the details of the girl's life. This gives the protagonist an advantage, and she tells a heartfelt story of her long-standing love for the Marquis. How she couldn't stand aside after the saint married someone else, and her beloved was overcome with grief. Finally, she declares that she understands their divorce is inevitable. But first, she wants to do as much as she can for the boy, as she did everything possible for the one who married someone else and didn't receive anything good in return. Such words could not leave the sensitive madam indifferent. She asks the girl not to speak of divorce and promises to help in any way she can. After some time of lessons, Hestja learned the ways of society etiquette from her tutor. It was difficult for her at first, but the young lady managed to overcome it. It became a necessity as she was now frequently invited to various events. She tried her best and never gave up hope of becoming a special person to her husband. One morning, the maid told her mistress about the capture of the very same criminal that Hestja had spoken of with the prince and his wife. This increased the likelihood that her words would now be taken seriously. She would have loved to see the enemy's reaction when they found out that she was right. The protagonist is very pleased that she was able to bond with the madam, and everything else is going according to her plan. However, this peaceful morning is disturbed by the strange reaction of the maid to the question about the Marquis. As it turns out, the crown prince came to visit, but even the servant could not utter his real name. The visit of this person was expected after the capture of the thief, but it's strange that he came straight to her husband, not to Hestja. The girl runs to where the meeting is taking place. The butler eavesdrops at the door and, according to him, the men are just talking. But Hestja hears something and bursts into the room where the Marquis stands already covered in blood. Kalis is wounded, and the prince stands opposite. The protagonist orders the butler to summon a doctor and screams at the ruler for what he has done to him. The crown prince immediately puts on his hood and runs away. Although Kalis is a stranger to her, the protagonist is concerned about him and is currently terrified. The doctor will arrive soon, and her husband only needs to endure a little longer. Later, Hestja sits by her husband's bedside. The doctor gave a good prognosis because the wound was not deep. Apparently, the Marquis was already in a bad emotional state, and what he heard from the crown prince was the last straw. The protagonist becomes curious about what the boy heard that made him decide to end his life again. It is at this moment that the Marquis comes to his senses and decides to tell his wife everything that happened. He did not want to see the crown prince, but he came to him to ask about marriage. He tried to reason with his friend, who, due to his association with such a suspicious woman, could lose his reputation. This angered the Marquis. He told the prince everything about how he did not want to live on the day of the saint's wedding and how Hestja saved him, boldly breaking into his quarters. He will no longer be cautious because caution led to his beloved marrying someone else. The ruler does not understand why the Marquis did not tell anyone about his condition, as they are friends, and the saint was worried about him, even though she did not send a single letter. It was then that he smashed the window, injuring his hand. In this short time, although he was disappointed that he survived on the day of the saint's wedding, he decided to be honest with himself no matter what. He thanks the protagonist for helping him come to this important decision. Hestja struggles to hold back tears. She loves this man so much, and now she understands that she came back for a reason. Meanwhile, the saint is shocked by the news that the Marquis tried to end his life on the day of their wedding. She and the prince decide to find out why the girl really needed this marriage, and now they believe more in her ability to see the future. When Hestja's husband finally opened up to her and began to trust her, she decided to start a new life for his sake. However, she felt uncomfortable in the company of ladies who asked strange questions. A few days ago, she received an invitation to a tea party from the high-ranking Countess Aranise, who is similar in status to her tutor. If she accepts this invitation, she risks receiving strange questions about her marriage to the Marquis. But if she ignores the invitation, it will only make things worse, as this lady is neutral towards the saint and could cause a big scandal. Hestja decides to accept the invitation for the sake of her husband and her revenge plan, which could be hindered by a scandal with the aristocrat. Madame Harmonia also cannot stand aside and decides to help the girl as much as she can so that she does not embarrass herself at the event and maintains a respectable position in society. Thus, Hestia found herself in the company of strangers. The hostess of the event, for some unknown reason, sat the main heroine closer to herself, although there was a distance between the other guests at the table. Hestia decided not to make herself worry even more and wrote it off as a coincidence. Suddenly, all the attention was focused on the Marquis, and she was asked to introduce herself. Now the girl remembers all the advice of her etiquette teacher on how to please older ladies who will initially look down on a young girl. Hestia timidly speaks and expresses her concern, as she has never been in the company of such distinguished ladies before. From the very beginning, the main heroine managed to make the right move, and therefore the atmosphere became only more friendly. She only wanted to gently inquire about the women's attitudes towards the saint, but one of the participants at the tea party preempted her and wanted to know if the wife was worried about her husband's unrequited love for another woman. The girl did not lose her composure, as she was prepared for this and made it clear to everyone that her husband was no longer interested in the prince's wife. In the evening, Hestia feels extremely exhausted as she rests in her chamber. She is pleased with how the tea party went. The Marchioness impressed the aristocratic ladies, though many of them had ambiguous reactions to comments about the saint. This means there is a chance to use them to her advantage in the future. The best part of the tea party, however, was the anger of the women towards the prince's wife, who invited young ladies to the palace for tea and completely forgot about the distinguished ladies. Hestia offered to help them and talk to the saint during her next visit to the palace, and she was entrusted with the mission to bring the ladies back to the palace. Now the aristocratic ladies will definitely be able to obtain information about her opponent. The most important task now is to gain the Countess's trust. To do this, Hestia retrieves her journal, in which she records all the facts she learns during her previous visits. This way, she will be able to make accurate predictions. Now she needs to find an event that could strike a blow, not to her husband, but to the saint. Finally, she found a good option. The next morning, Hestia went to her husband to ask for permission for her further actions. She didn't know how to get to his chambers, but fortunately, the footman helped her. He agreed to inform the lord about the main heroine's visit, but asked her not to waste time looking for him in the future, and to go straight to the Marchioness. The young woman asked the man to continue helping her in such matters, as her husband's condition is still unstable and it would be better not to disturb him unnecessarily. She would like to see her beloved as often as possible, but she cannot do so at this time. In the study, the young man was relaxing in an open robe, and Hestia blushed at such a beautiful sight of the Marquis. She asked her husband for permission to meet with the crown princess, and he surprisingly agreed easily. The girl did not expect this and was prepared for a more emotional reaction, so now she did not know what to say. It seemed like he was no longer concerned about the saint. The Marquis also asked Hestia not to bother the footman with trivial matters and to go directly to her husband if necessary. It appears that he believes the young woman is exploiting his servants. In reality, the Marquis listened to the request of the butler that Hestia could visit him without prior notice. This seemed strange to the man, as in their first meeting, the girl burst into Kayla's chambers, forgetting her manners, and now she is trying to be polite. Perhaps their first meeting was the reason for the girl's anxiety. The man also suggested that he himself tell the girl about this. She would surely be very pleased to hear it from her husband. However, now she did not look happy. On the contrary, she was worried that she had started to use servants too often for her own purposes and must have become a big problem for everyone after her appearance. Kalis wanted to release his wife for her business if she said everything she wanted, but the girl asked for one more favor. She wanted to borrow the ring with a pink diamond from the Marquis cabinet for a while. This jewelry was very expensive to the man, as he wanted to present it as a wedding gift to his beloved. Hestia promises to return the jewelry intact. She needs this ring to hurt the saint as much as possible during their meeting. However, the Marquis gave her the jewelry since it had no owner. The girl left her husband's office with full determination to destroy the princess. The Marquis couldn't help but notice that she looked scary. Soon the girl wrote a letter to the saint and sent it herself so as not to bother the butler. After a short preparation, she was already in the palace. The girl could not even think that she would want to come to this place again. Hestia was looking at the ring on her finger. It was the first gift from her beloved. It didn't matter how much it cost and who it was originally intended for. The most important thing was that it ended up with her. And the best part would be seeing how Diana reacts to it. Initially, the princess regarded her guest with a haughty demeanor. She made it clear that she did not even want to grant an audience, but in the end, her curiosity about what the girl had to say overcame her. However, this mood did not last long for the girl, as she noticed the ring on the main character's hand. At first, it seemed as though she hadn't even noticed the adornment, as a smile appeared on her face, but it later became clear that she was suppressing her emotions. The hands of the saint tremble at this moment, which gives Hestia confidence in her actions. The girl hands the princess an envelope with predictions for the near future. These are just facts from her diary that should have piqued the princess's interest. While she decided to strike at the saint by wearing the ring, she had a significant and unpleasant prediction in store for her husband. In her previous life, at the border of the state, bandits appeared, who turned out to be enemy spies. This caused many problems for the crown prince, who had to make a lot of effort and concessions to resolve the conflict diplomatically on behalf of his sick father, the ruler. After that, rumors circulated among the common people that if the issue had been handled by someone other than the crown prince, like Marquis Kalis, the deal would have been much more profitable. But at that time he was not in a position to deal with such matters. The princess is greatly surprised that the young lady came to her with a prophecy rather than to her husband. Nevertheless, she agrees that he should be informed as soon as possible. Finally, the main character asks the saint about the date of her tea party. This infuriates the crown prince's wife, who considers it very tactless to ask such questions directly to the princess. She still clearly feels her superiority, but Hestia doesn't mind if her interlocutor becomes angry. She apologizes for her rudeness but explains that since the marquis revealed such important information to the rulers, she can ask a simple question. The saint calms down and promises to send Hestia an invitation to the tea party once she plans it. However, the princess demands respect from her guests and requests that such questions not be asked again. At that moment, Hestia's perception of the heroine of her beloved novel crumbles definitively, for the young lady is not at all saintly, but merely a malicious and arrogant woman. Finally, the saint inquires about the ring that her husband had given to the young lady. It turns out that she had reacted to the provocation after all. The plan is set in motion, and this piece of jewelry is only the first step in her revenge. The princess dearly wants to tell the marquis that her husband had not intended to give her the ring, but she restrains herself, as evident from her expression. As everything was going according to plan, it was time for the theatrical performance. Hestia pretended to be pleased and pretended not to understand how her husband managed to prepare such a beautiful gift. Eventually, she began to talk about the unique color of the gemstone. The young woman went on to compare the diamond to the color of the princess's hair and realized that they were very similar. Then, as if she were shocked, Hestia claimed that she had discovered that the jewelry was intended for the princess all along, not for her. Hestia had hoped that the princess would apologize and convince the marquis that the gift was intended for his wife, not for the princess. However, this did not happen, which briefly left Hestia bewildered. Perhaps the princess was upset that the young woman did not know who the ring was intended for, but regardless, Hestia should realize that the princess's reaction could lead to a conflict between Hestia and her husband. The only option for Hestia was to continue with her play. She sat in her chair and cried, covering her face with her hands. Only then did Diana finally stand up and approach the main character to console her, assuring her that everything was not as it seemed at first glance. Hestia realized that, previously, the saint's life was ideal, since she was the center of the romance novel. Now, for the first time, she had become the villainess. The main character thanked the princess for revealing the truth, despite how awful it was. Diana's behavior became stranger than before. She thanked Hestia for saving the marquis's life, but then, with anger in her voice, acknowledged that he now belonged to his wife. Saying this, the princess hastily left. Hestia was not upset by the princess's actions since everything went according to her plan, and she was thrilled to see such a reaction from the young woman. Upon her return home, the main character is greeted by the butler. He is curious to find out how the meeting went, but the young woman promises to tell him later. Hestia learns that her husband is spending all his time in his study, which is not surprising since he usually reads when he is nervous, as she knows from the novel, which she almost reveals to the butler. Hestia decides to visit Kalis and then rest. She wants to spend more time with her beloved, but it seems impossible for now. The first thing the young woman hears from her husband is a question about the well-being of the saint. Of course, it was evident that feelings cannot disappear in one moment, but Hestia is disappointed with such behavior from her partner. The entire conversation revolves around the princess, and the question about Hestia's future puts her at a loss. She does not want to upset the marquis, but the saint will soon lose her power. After Kalis' death, the relationship between the prince and the saint was not joyful. Very soon, everyone in the empire realized how important the marquis was. Diana, on the other hand, lost her ability to heal, and with just her appearance, she could not attract supporters. The aristocracy was angry with the girl, and even the prince, who was usually a support for his beloved, was too busy with political issues to support her. Perhaps the situation would have changed if the couple had a child, but this was not mentioned in the novel. In such a situation, the girl does not know what to do. It makes no sense to lie to Kalis. He will find out about it anyway, but if she tells the truth, he may return to the saint. Hestia is silent. Her husband understands what the girl is afraid of, but tries to prove to her that he no longer has feelings for the princess. The main character realizes that her lover is lying to her, because if it were true, he would not even ask about her well-being. It was naive on the part of the girl to think that her lover had feelings for her only because of the ring he gave her. Hestia is nervous, but still tells the Marquis the truth about the imminent loss of the saint's powers. At first, he doesn't really believe her, and Hestia decides not to miss her chance and informs him about her own abilities. The girl only lies about her last vision. The main character really thinks that the princess's life is not in danger. The Marquis dismisses his wife, and she has nothing left to do but leave him alone. The girl is very worried that he might do something foolish and regrets saying too much. A few days after their conversation, Hestia found herself unable to sleep. She had not seen her beloved, and the saint had not informed her about their tea party, despite promising to do so. As a result, when it was time for her etiquette lesson, Madame could not help but notice her distress. The main heroine understood that even if she was very upset, she could not show it, otherwise her plan for revenge could fail. Thus, she attributed her state to her concern over the ring, which she had learned from the princess was originally meant for her, but then the Marquis gave it to his wife. She had wanted to distance Madame from the saint, but in the end, the woman began to defend her and even planned to request an audience to inquire about what had happened. Hestia had to calm her tutor down so that she could safely return home. After the incident, the young woman walked in the garden and thought about the situation, which had not turned out as she had expected. Kalis was arranging bouquets in the gazebo in the garden while his butler brought him fresh flowers. It was the butler who suggested that the young man should find a hobby. Little did he know that the Marquis would seek solace in flowers. As he finishes the latest bouquet, Kalis thinks of his wife. The crown prince had written to him, informing him that thanks to the prediction of the heroine, the country had avoided problems at the border. This greatly surprised the young man, as one person's abilities could not be so great as to predict the future of an entire country. Having such abilities, she had decided to save him during their first meeting. This thought leads Kalis to something, but he doesn't have time to think it through as he sees his wife passing by. He catches up to her with a bouquet in his hand. Hestia looks at the flowers, wishing they were for her. As she gazes at the bouquet with love, her husband suspects that she likes the flowers and decides to give them to her. This makes Hestia almost scream with joy. At that moment, the young man asks his wife to talk. The butler approaches them, concerned about the lady's condition as she looks pale. Euros asks the girl to rest, but she insists on hearing what the Marquis had to say, so they are left alone again. Hestia can't stop admiring the bouquet, which makes the Marquis smile. He is very surprised at how quickly his wife can change her mood. The girl sees her lover smile for the first time in a long time, and this becomes another reason for her happiness. However, they have to return to the conversation, which revolves around the reason for his rescue. Hestia doesn't want to hear about it again until she begins to suspect that the Marquis has figured out her feelings for him. She finally musters up the courage to express her feelings out loud and calls him her beloved, using a modern word from her world, which her husband doesn't know. At the same time, the Marquis himself assumes that he has an important task ahead of him and Hestia has saved him for a reason. Kalis begins to inquire the main heroine about the word she said. He suspects that it could be an ancient dialect, a foreign language, or even words from the future that the girl saw in her vision. Hestia herself is too agitated to find a rational answer, but the Marquis won't give up, as curiosity has always been his trait. Eventually, the main heroine cannot take it anymore and truthfully explains the meanings of the word. After which, she starts to justify herself, but her husband cleverly shifts the topic of conversation to the bouquet, promising to get more of them for the girl, although that wasn't what he initially wanted to talk about. The Marquis thinks that with the changes in the present, the predictions of the main heroine should also change. If he is still alive, it should already change a lot, which means that her previous predictions are no longer valid. Hestia was not prepared for this situation. If anyone doubts her ability, she may be considered a simple liar. Of course, she is happy that her beloved is spending time with her, but she is not happy with this topic of conversation. She cautiously explains that despite the changing events, life goes on. This puts her husband into even greater melancholy because there is no difference whether he is alive or dead. Hestia did not want this outcome, she was just trying to find a way out of the situation. She needs to fix this situation, so she gives an uplifting speech that if the Marquis can change the life of even one person for the better, then his presence in this world is already very important. She makes it clear how important the Marquis is to her and calls him her beloved once again. Their conversation is interrupted by the butler, who came to inform them that dinner is ready, and the girl hurries to leave. She must be more careful with her words as she has used a word not from this world for the second time. This cannot continue. Her husband's laughter behind her surprises both her and the butler, as they cannot believe that the Marquis really laughed. This is the end of the first part. If you would like me to make a second part of this manhwa, please support the channel by giving it a like and leaving a comment. Additionally, please subscribe to the channel to stay updated on new videos.